Have you ever met a celebrity who turned out to be a total jerk? My friend's dad, James, got on an elevator with Charlie Sheen when he was visiting LA once. He said he got in and clicked his floor and waited for a minute. After a couple floors went by, Charlie Sheen just turned to him and said, "Hey, do you know who I am?" And James, to his credit, looked at Charlie Sheen straight in the eyes and said, "Yeah, I really like your dad's work," and got off the elevator. True story, swear to God.
That's pretty funny. Your friend's dad took a good shot with that response. It's not every day you meet a celebrity, especially someone like Charlie Sheen. The whole interaction is a mix of humor and casualness. Just a moment that shows how people react differently when faced with fame. Simple and real, it makes for a cool story to tell later on.
Tim Allen. So he bought a house near my summer home. My mother's friend decided to bring him a pie to welcome him to the neighborhood. He immediately threatened to call the police if she didn't leave his property. He also drives a PT Cruiser. Edit. Also met his kids because we were having a big barbecue. They were very laid back.
That's interesting. Tim Allen seems like a big deal, but it sounds like he wasn't in the mood for visitors. It's funny how some celebrities can be just like anyone else, dealing with neighborly awkwardness. The part about the barbecue with his kids is nice though. Sometimes you get a glimpse of a more regular life behind the fame. Just goes to show everyone has their moments, even celebrities.
Met Bruce Springsteen at the gym. Amazing shape for his age. He was with a trainer, but I knew I might not get the chance to meet him again. Walked up, said, "Hey Bruce, huge fan, great to meet you." He smiled, shook my hand, and said thank you. Couldn't have been nicer. On the other hand, Bon Jovi was a dick. Saw him at a local burger place and walked in like he owned it. Then seemed real annoyed when a few 30-something women wanted a picture. Didn't smile or say a word. The waitress said they hate when he comes in, attitude and no tip. Edit, she to he. Can confirm Bruce is a man.
That's a pretty cool encounter with Bruce. It's nice when someone famous is down to earth. Meeting them in a casual setting can be surprising. On the flip side, Bon Jovi's attitude sounds disappointing. It's interesting how some celebs behave and others don't. A little kindness goes a long way, especially when fans just want a moment. Makes you think about how they might not always live up to expectations.
I used to work at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. One day, I was cleaning up the patio when I looked over and saw Ewan McGregor sitting there. We made eye contact, and I'm pretty sure he could read my thoughts, which were, "OMG, IDZOBI1. Real Jedi, shit's going down. I'm gonna get a pic, and we'll be BFFs forever." At roughly the same time, I realized I could read his thoughts too, which went like, please don't come over and talk to me. Please, I'm begging you, just let me enjoy my overpriced coffee and breakfast sandwich in peace. For the love of God, just keep walking. My sense of decency won out over my fanboydom. TLDR, had a telepathic convo with Obi-Wan.
That's a pretty wild experience. Running into a celebrity can mess with your head, especially if they're someone iconic. It's funny how you imagined a cool interaction, but he was just trying to enjoy his day. It makes sense to respect their space. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that never happen, right? Just a moment of connection, even if it's silent.
I don't know if you'd call her a celebrity anymore, but Avril Lavigne. When I was a kid, she was my idol after her first album anyway. And we happened to live near where she was from, or at least was raised, being Napanee, Ontario. So we stopped by one day, the most exciting thing to a kid, to look around where she was from, and I saw her at a Giant Tiger location. I was so happy. But when her mom came out of the store and handed her a bag, she started yelling at her mother that she bought her the wrong chocolate bar. I very quickly lost interest and disliked her from then on. Don't cuss out your mom in public. That's just rude.
That's a pretty relatable experience. It's weird how quickly someone can go from idol to just another person when you see them acting like that. You expect celebrities to be perfect, but they have regular moments too. Just shows that everyone has their flaws. Makes you rethink the whole idol thing. Not worth getting caught up in.
Some friends and I were getting high in a park. I think we were all in 11th grade, when Bill Nye pulled up into the parking lot. I'm assuming he was scouting locations for a shoot, either for Almost Live or his own show. We thought it'd be funny to go ask him how to make bombs, and he said something to the effect of he'd love to show us how to blow ourselves up. Can't say I blame him for that.
That's a wild story. Running into Bill Nye like that must have been something else. Not every day you get to joke around with a science guy in a park. I get the humor in asking about bombs, but it's good he kept it light. Better to leave those things in the movies, you know? Definitely a memorable moment for all of you.
Billy D. Williams. I had the misfortune of sitting at the table next to him while having dinner at a Bonefish Grill in Kissimmee, Florida a few years ago. Our chairs were back to back, and Mr. Williams continually backed his chair up, forcibly pushing my chair and ribcage into the table. I turned around and politely said, "Excuse me, could you please move your chair in?" 3 times, to which he turned his head and looked at me over his shoulder, so I was confident he heard me. But he proceeded to ignore me and continue to down double Jack and Cokes while getting a pep talk from his 12-year-old agent. The phrase, "You are Billy fucking D fucking Williams, and they're fucking lucky to have you, man," was repeated probably 30 times while sat there with my boobs on my table. He wouldn't even move when I got up to leave, so I slid out of my chair as fast as I could when he got up to use the restroom. It was so obnoxious it was amusing. Now all space hogs we come across get the code, named Billy D, smiley face.
That sounds pretty annoying. It's wild how someone can be so oblivious in a public space. I can imagine trying to enjoy a meal and having to deal with that. I guess that's how people end up with funny stories, though. Now you have a solid inside joke to share. Billy D really took the whole star thing to a different level that night. Space hogging legends happen.
I once waited a table for Missy Elliott. My coworkers told me that previously, when she would eat at that restaurant, she wouldn't make eye contact with the servers and wouldn't tip that well. Sure enough, when I went up to her table, she made no eye contact, most likely because she was on the phone, and her friend ordered for her. However, when she paid, I told her I really liked the song she did with G-Dragon. K-pop fans know what I'm talking about. And she was like, "Oh, thank you, thank you." She then left me a pretty decent cash tip. She wasn't too bad, I guess, even though other people had bad experiences with her. On the other hand, Justin fucking Bieber also used to eat at that restaurant frequently, and he acts exactly like what you would expect the Biebs to act.
I once served a celebrity too. They had a reputation for being difficult, but when I approached their table, they were pretty chill. We chatted for a bit, and they actually complimented my service. Surprisingly, they left a nice tip, which I didn't expect based on what I'd heard. Not everyone is what you think they are, I guess. It's just interesting to see the real side sometimes.
I haven't, but my mom has. When I was a baby growing up in Sun Valley, Idaho, I had pneumonia and my mom was in line to fill my prescription. Behind her was Jamie Lee Curtis. We have a lot of celebrities who use Sun Valley as a getaway. Anyways, she pulled the whole, "Do you know who I am? My daughter is very sick. Can I go ahead of you?" thing. My mom turned around to her and replied, "Lady, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. My daughter is sick too. So no, you may not." JLC then huffed at my mom, and that was that. I have never liked any of her movies. Edit. No disrespect to Her Majesty.
That's a pretty interesting encounter. It's funny how people act when they're famous. Your mom stood her ground, though. I get it. When it comes to your kid's health, nothing else really matters. It's a good reminder that even celebrities are just regular people sometimes. And it's cool that you have that experience to share, even if it kind of turned you off from her movies.
I work with someone that used to be a filming liaison for Toronto hospitals. A lot of movies are filmed here, and she basically has met everyone you can think. She has the pictures with the ones that allowed it to prove it, so I know she isn't bullshitting. Mike Myers, she said, was the biggest asshole and didn't want anyone to make eye contact with them. She said basically everyone was weird and almost an asshole. Dustin Hoffman was supposedly really nice and funny and treated everyone like a friend. Bruce Willis is gay. She worked on 2 films with him, and she said he had random attractive males sent to his room and trailer. Oh yeah, and 50 Cent, if you can believe it, is actually really, really nice. This lady is a pretty fat, short, older lady, and he gave her the biggest hug at the end of the shoot and took a bunch of pictures with her, and wasn't the moronic lady offending pop star you'd think he is. He's actually really nice, which sort of blew me away.
So I know someone who worked in film with a lot of celebs. She's met a bunch and got pics to prove it. Apparently, Mike Myers was a real jerk, avoiding eye contact with everyone. On the flip side, Dustin Hoffman was cool and friendly. She mentioned Bruce Willis had attractive guys around too. Surprisingly, 50 Cent turned out to be really nice and gave her a hug at the end of a shoot. Quite the contrast.
Carlos Mencia was just as big an asshole before Comedy Central gave him his own series. I saw him at the Ontario Mills Improv, and after the show I stopped to talk and buy a CD. I told him that I just heard about him that week on Napster, and that I invited my friends out to see him live. He gets in an argument with me over how fucked up it is that I shared his shit without permission and without paying him. I reminded him that without Napster, I never would have been exposed to him, never would have brought my friends with me, and wouldn't have just given him cash for his albums. He insisted it was still stealing. I still regret buying his album. I was very happy when the internet shunned him.
It's interesting how some artists handle their exposure. Had a similar experience with a comedian who was super aggressive about sharing material. I get the need to protect work, but pushing away fans can backfire. Sometimes, the way to grow is to appreciate the promotion, not just the cash. Seeing that comedian fade away wasn't surprising. People remember those moments. It's a lesson about how to engage with your audience.
David Copperfield. At the end of his show, they set up a line for people who wants their tickets autographed. My brother and I lined up. When we got close, there was a sign that was a fake believe it or not. Factoid about Copperfield, shortest signature in the world. The look on his face as he signs tickets. This bored, get me away from these pests look. His signature is basically just a badly drawn checkmark, and he doesn't even bother to acknowledge anyone. To this day, I haven't figured out why they even bothered to set up that line. David Sedaris, though, is such a sweetheart. Talks to you, answers in full sentences, is genuinely curious about his questions. You leave feeling like you've actually met him.
David Copperfield seems like he was just going through the motions. The way he signed those tickets with a checkmark says a lot. It's funny how someone so famous can seem so detached. On the other hand, David Sedaris really makes an effort. It's nice when a celebrity takes the time to engage like that. Makes the experience a lot better when you're not just another face in the crowd.
On January 3rd, 2015, I was on a plane sitting next to Lovie Smith, head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going from Dallas to Tampa. Had no idea who he was until about mid-flight. He was a nice man, total gentleman. The flight we were on was my last leg after a nightmare return to the US from Japan. Took me 2+ days. Anyhow, I'm also handicapped, so here I am trying to get settled and pre-board with carry-ons, canes, etc., and I become aware someone is standing in the aisle. I look up, and he's patiently waiting for me to get settled. I said to him that I appreciated his patience and apologized for my slowness. He said to take my time, he'd wait. He offered to help when we landed, but I told him go on because I have to wait for my scooter to be brought to me. He climbed over me very nimbly and said he appreciated me letting him get off first because he had a meeting as soon as he got off.
That sounds like a pretty interesting encounter. It's cool how someone like Lovie Smith, who's a public figure, can just be a regular nice guy. I get how stressful travel can be, especially after a long trip. It's good to see people like him making an effort to be patient, especially when others might not understand what you're going through. Just goes to show you that kindness can be found in unexpected places.
My dad has a friend who is head of security at a large arena. He has worked with countless celebrities and politicians. He says the best was Robin Williams, who treated everybody around him like personal friends. He also says the worst is Toby Keith, who is the most arrogant person in the entire world.
That's interesting. It must be fun to work in that kind of environment. Robin Williams sounds like he really knew how to connect with people, which is pretty rare among celebs. On the other hand, it's surprising to hear about someone like Toby Keith being such a jerk. You'd think that success would humble someone, but I guess not everyone sees it that way.
Have you ever met a non-celebrity and they turned out to be a total douche, but then over time it turns out they really weren't, and that it just turns out the circumstances you met them under determined your first impression? I'm guessing it's the same with celebrities, except that it's amplified due to their fame.
Yeah, I met this guy once who seemed really arrogant at first. He acted all high and mighty, so I didn't like him much. But later, I got to know him better. Turns out, he just had a rough day. We had a chat, and he was actually pretty chill. It made me realize that first impressions can be misleading, whether it's regular folks or celebrities.
Not a total douche at all, but I was next to Ezra Miller at a locker scene in Perks of Being a Wallflower. As an extra, he was the worst smelling human being I've ever had the ill fate of breathing next to. I don't know what it was, or how or why. Thank goodness that scene was just me walking away from my locker as he got to his. Chatted with him a bit between takes though, and he seemed pretty down to earth. All of the girls were fawning over him the whole time I was on set.
That sounds interesting. Being an extra in a film brings you closer to actors, even if it's a bit awkward at times. Ezra Miller might have a unique vibe. It's cool you got to chat with him. Funny how people notice that sort of thing, but still, it seems he was nice to talk to. Gotta love the unpredictability of those set experiences.
I've told this story before, but I met George Takei at a Dragon Con in 2006, I think, before he got super popular again. He was just such a genuine person. My husband told him a funny story. My husband and I actually had our first kiss while watching an original Star Trek episode where everyone inhales the crazy gas and George Takei is all oiled up and fencing. He thought that was adorable. My husband immediately came and got me so that I could meet him, but his little meet and greet at the booth was over. A handler was taking him to a panel or something. George saw my husband coming with me, stopped, and had another maybe 15-minute conversation with us. His handler kept grabbing his elbow, no offense to her. She was just doing her job, and he kept yanking his elbow out of her grasp so he could continue to talk to us. He was just so genuinely interested in us as human beings. I think that's why he keeps being so popular and actually likes being a part of the convention circuit.
That's a nice story. Meeting someone like George Takei must have been memorable. It's cool how he took the time to have a longer chat, even with his busy schedule. The connection over your first kiss story is pretty sweet. Just goes to show that some celebrities really appreciate their fans. It's probably a big reason why people enjoy seeing him at conventions.
My grandmother has been acting for decades. Here are the nicest celebrities she met. Sean Penn was very shy, but incredibly sweet. And Hathaway was a bit ditzy, a bit all over the place, yet really nice. Tom Cruise was just as short as everyone says, and quite welcoming. I could ask her for more info at some stage, but this is all I remember offhand. She hasn't had any bad experiences I know of. My cousin knew Jack Gleason in school. She said he was really pompous and a bit up his own ass as he wouldn't stop gloating and showing off his picture with Christian Bale.
That's cool your grandmother has met some famous people. Seems like most of them were down to earth, which is nice. It's always interesting hearing about those interactions. Your cousin's experience with Jack Gleason is a bit different though. It's funny how some people get really into their fame and have to show off. It's all part of the world they move in, I guess.
Cristiano Ronaldo was staying at the same hotel as him in Real Madrid in France for a Champions League match. He was with Ozil, another player, in the hotel lobby, and I asked for a photo. He looked at me in the eye and said, "Why would I ever have a photo with you?" To a teenager who idolized him, this broke me. Pepe even looked at me with sympathy, which I appreciated. It gets even worse as the next day, I was at breakfast in the small cafe, fountain coffee room, in the hotel, and who walks in? Ronaldo and Ozil again. Only seats are next to me, so I have the most awkward 30 minutes with Ronaldo next to me, clearly remembering me and feeling a dick. Ended up with Ozil very kindly asking if I wanted a picture, and then giving me a signed shirt and allowing me to have pictures with other players. Very kind of him, all whilst Ronaldo just sat there. Have met Ronaldo a further few times, and he has personally acknowledged me every time with a small nod of the head. The third time, he asked if I wanted a photo, to which I said yes, and since then, my opinions have changed of him.
That's a tough experience. Meeting someone you look up to can be awkward, especially when they don't respond how you expect. It's cool Ozil stepped in and turned it around for you. Sometimes, people have a rough day. Ronaldo's nods on subsequent meetings show he remembered and maybe felt a bit bad. It's interesting how first impressions can change over time. Good that you got a better encounter later.
I met Nick Swartzen in Vegas at a video roulette table. He was super nice and took pictures with everyone who asked him. I started bullshitting with him while we were sitting there drinking, and he was quieter than I expected but really friendly. After we sat and talked for a while, he got up to leave, cashed out on his machine, and handed me his voucher for $485. He is now my favorite comedian, smiley face.
That sounds like a cool experience. Meeting someone famous can be memorable, especially in a relaxed setting like Vegas. It's nice when they turn out to be friendly and down to earth. Getting a cash voucher from him? That's a nice bonus. It's great that you have a fun story to tell and a new favorite comedian.
Viggo Mortensen. I knew who he was, but I played it like I didn't cause I've heard he doesn't much care for attention. He ended up putting me through the ringer for a jacket. He was extremely demanding, and although he ended up being fairly decent on the third day, as I had to call in a few favors from other stores.
That sounds like a real test of patience. It's interesting how someone you know can surprise you when you're trying to keep things low-key. Viggo definitely has that vibe, wanting to do his own thing without the fuss. Getting a jacket probably took more effort than expected, but it's good to hear he came around eventually. Sometimes people just need a little time to warm up.
Apparently Joan, Jet, isn't very nice. She was playing at our county fair when I was in high school and ended up staying at the hotel my mom worked at. She was really rude to my mom and kept complaining that the hotel wasn't nicer. Seriously, Joan Jett? You're playing a county fair in a podunk farming town. She also treated the talent booker/liaison like he was her personal assistant and kept sending him out to buy her strawberries and other groceries in the middle of the night and getting pissed that they were from Walmart because that's the only grocery store in town that's open at 1 a.m. She was a bit of a diva, to say the least.
I remember hearing a similar story about a big-name artist being a total diva too. Some friends of mine worked at a venue and had to deal with a band that acted like they were the only ones in the room. They wanted all these ridiculous demands met, and it was just a small gig. It's wild how some people forget where they came from, like fame changes everything. Just kind of left a bad taste.
This is kind of the opposite of what your question asked. The only celebrity I've ever met was Robin Williams. I was at the airport and I kept seeing this guy everywhere I went and kept thinking, man, That dude looks a lot like Robin Williams. Did T think too much of it until I was boarding my plane and the guy is standing right behind me in line. I think to myself, oh shit, and I take a peek at his ticket. Sure enough, it's him. I was so excited and I suck at small talk, so I didn't say too much to him, but he was super nice. Told him I like his work and gave him a handshake. We bullshitted for a few minutes after that. Still wish I had gotten a picture with him or something. I just figured that people get tired of being fawned over.
Meeting Robin Williams must have been something else. It's cool that you saw him and realized who he was. A quick chat is pretty good. It's not easy to talk to someone famous. Sometimes it's better to keep it simple and just show appreciation. Missing a photo kinda happens, but that moment is probably what you remember most. It's nice he was friendly and willing to talk.
Weird Al is my hero. Met him after a concert in 2000. He was obviously tired from running around and putting on an amazing show, but he sat there and chatted with every fan who wanted to meet him like a real champ. He was super sweet and smelled like candy. Seriously, like a bowl of hard candies at your grandma's house.
That sounds like a cool experience. Meeting someone you admire can be pretty special. It's nice to see that he took the time to connect with fans, even when he was tired. The candy smell adds an interesting detail, too. It's those little things that make moments memorable.
William Shatner. He has horses in Kentucky, at least it's what I'm told. At any rate, I've served him several times in a couple of different restaurants here in Louisville. He is incredibly demanding, orders things that he has fabricated that are not on the menu, and never leaves more than $2. Once, he asked me for a triple decaf espresso. When I told him that we didn't serve espresso, he looked incredulous. There's a coffee shop next door, isn't there? Sad thing is, I actually want to get it for him and bought it with my own money.
That's an interesting story. Meeting someone like Shatner must be memorable. It's wild how he expects a coffee shop's menu in a restaurant. Kind of crazy you bought it for him out of your own pocket. Sounds like a unique experience serving someone so demanding. Not many people would go that extra mile. You don't hear stories like this every day. Makes for a good chat later on, I guess.
I met Tim Allen when his sister came into the video store I used to work at. She had hundreds of dollars in late fees and refused to pay. Normally the store manager would let her slide. I was the manager on duty the day the system decided she had to pay her late fees before she could rent anything else. When I informed her, she threw a tantrum and informed me who she was, and if I wasn't going to fix it, she would bring her brother in. She took off and came back with him a few minutes later. He walked right behind the counter and just started screaming at me. When we finally let me speak, I showed him that the system would not let me check the movies out or remove the fees he gave in, and asked how much it was, then threw the money at me and walked out in a huff.
That's wild. I can't imagine being yelled at by Tim Allen over late fees. It's funny how someone's fame can change the situation so quickly. You'd think he'd be cool about it, but I guess he was just looking out for his sister. At least you stood your ground. Those late fees can be a pain, even if it's a famous person.
I met Will Ferrell when he was in Montreal in 2005. He was very polite and shook my hand. I met UFC fighter Krzysztof Sosinski, and he was down to earth and watched UFC 107 with us at a bar in Victoria, BC. I met Alexander Ovechkin, NHL hockey player, in 2009, and he was an asshole, wouldn't sign or take pics with any fans at all.
Meeting Will Ferrell was cool, he was friendly. Then there was Krzysztof Sosinski, really chill guy, just hung out and watched a fight with us. But Ovechkin? Not so great. He acted like he was too good to take pics or sign anything. It's funny how some celebrities can be really nice while others just don't care at all.
Before I retired, I flew commercially quite often. On one flight from Atlanta to Boston, I got an upgrade and settled into first-class luxury. The guy next to me was constantly getting up and going to the toilet, or to just get up and move around. We chatted a little, and he napped. I noticed the attendants were constantly coming by our seats to see if we needed anything. At the end of the flight, one of the attendants came by to assist my seat, made in priority exit. As he left, he said he would like to thank me for treating him like a normal traveler and for not hassling him or asking for an autograph. He said it was really nice to spend the entire flight just chatting and enjoying the flight. I honestly have no idea who he was and was kind of embarrassed to ask. Glad he enjoyed the flight. I enjoyed the extra attention by the flight attendants.
That's a nice story. It's interesting how you can have a random encounter that ends up being pleasant. Sometimes, people just want to feel normal, away from their fame or jobs. It must have been a relief for that guy to just relax and chat without the pressure. Plus, you got to enjoy first-class perks. It sounds like a good flight overall, even with the mystery of who he was.
I used to deliver breakfast to a local radio station every Wednesday morning for the radio hosts. The sports presenter for the show was Wally Lewis. Queenslanders and anyone that follows rugby league knows who he is. Anyway, every Wednesday morning I'd take breakfast to them and chat to all of them except Wally. He'd snatch his breakfast and disappear to his own corner of the newsroom. No thank you, no acknowledgement, nothing, while the others were all grateful and more than willing to chat. Wally, if you're out there, I hope your day is as pleasant as you are. Smiley face.
Sounds like Wally was really in his own world. It's interesting how some people have that vibe, just focusing on their thing. The other hosts seemed a lot more friendly, though. It made the mornings better, I guess. I've had moments like that too, where some people appreciate what you do more than others. Makes you wonder about the dynamics in those environments.
As an elementary school teacher who lives in the same school boundary as my students, I live the paparazzi avoidance life. I go into Walmart with a hat and sunglasses on, because when a student realizes teachers are human beings who do human being things, holy shit. Yearbook release day is the best because I walk down the hall and get surrounded by kids who want autographs. I go into full inconvenience celebrity mode and sign like 3 of them and say, "That's all guys, thanks," and walk away. It's a fun therapeutic exercise after a long school year.
It's funny how being a teacher puts you in that celebrity spotlight with the kids. I get it though. When my friend was teaching, she would wear a hat and sunglasses too. The excitement on yearbook release day was wild. Kids would line up asking for autographs like she was famous. It's nice to feel appreciated after a tough year, even if it's just for a moment. It's all part of the experience.
Not a douche by any means, but Stephen Colbert was a lot more serious than you might think. He's got a natural sense of humor, but he's also very well-spoken and scholarly, almost like a professor in his own way. He seems to hold a lot of strong opinions and puts a lot of thought into his comedy, even the little stuff. He could probably trash a lot of politicians in a serious debate if he cared to do so. He's also a very polite individual. Bill Murray, on the other hand, is incredibly easygoing and humble. He's not the most extroverted guy, but loves his fans and one-on-one interaction. Source: South Carolinian.
It's interesting how different two people can be even in the same field. Stephen Colbert comes off as serious and thoughtful, using his humor to make strong points. Meanwhile, Bill Murray seems way more relaxed and approachable, almost like a friend you'd run into at a coffee shop. It's a reminder that even in comedy, personality plays a huge role in how people connect with their audience. Both bring something unique to the table.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.